I'm Batman.
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me? Who's got you?
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
I'm a doctor. But probably not the one you expect.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Welcome everyone to a special Geek This Week presentation, and this is the Star Trek Next Generation John D. Lance panel from Pensacon 2018 at the Pensacola Little Theater in Pensacola, Florida. John D. Lance, best known for playing Q in Star Trek Next Generation, also reprising the role in Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager, also known for doing the voice of Discord in My Little Pony. Friendship is Magic. Also played Colonel Frank Simmons in Stargate SG-1 and many other roles, including Torchwood, Miracle Day, as Agent Alan Shapiro. So sit back and enjoy this special presentation of the John D. Lance panel. Please be advised that the video starts 5 minutes into the panel. A friend was recording the panel for me due to me having to be at a photo op that was taking place at the same time. So please sit back and enjoy, once again, the Star Trek Next Generation John D. Lance panel from Pensacon 2018 at the Pensacola Little Theater in Pensacola, Florida. And don't forget to check out all the other great panel videos on the Geek This Week YouTube channel. And please leave a like on this video. Thank you.
As a presidential candidate wanting to have a suit made for me. It was a play which was, one could say it was a scathing indictment of Trump. But actually what it was also a cautionary tale. And the cautionary tale was, the character I was playing, was a lot smarter, a lot more charming, a lot more dangerous. And so it was, I always thought of it as being like Trump 3.0. And what would happen if we as a country had somebody like me, the character I was playing, and the things that I was saying, which were so close. And people, I would end up speeches and I would hear the audience go, oh. Adam Schiff came to see the show and he said, you know, as much as I knew that this was a play, you made me believe in certain things and agree with you when I didn't want to. So it was a cautionary tale. I'm a big sailor. I had a sailboat, and my last trip was I left from Ventura, California, and I sailed to the Marquesas, which was on the south of the equator. Sailed to the Marquesas, which was about 4,300 miles away, and then into the Tuamotus, which is the largest island archipelago, coral archipelago in the world, and then onto the Society Islands, and then I came all the way back and had some problems. I lost some equipment. One of the straps that holds on the mast broke, so we had a little bit of a storm. I did that with a young man who had never sailed before, who was a friend of one of my sons. And I'm getting ready for another trip, which will take me past the Society Islands, which is Tahiti and Bora Bora, into Fiji and I don't know, Tonga and places like that. And I asked him if he wanted to come, and he said yes. I said, Ray, are you sure? So I don't know. That's takes you. Have you thought of any questions up until now? So why don't we start? Who has a question? Just call it out.
What do you think Little Q is doing right now?
What do I think Little Q is doing right now? Now, who is Little Q?
Like your son in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Q.2.
Well, the son who played that role is in the State Department. And he ended up spending about 6 years in the Middle East, and then 2 years in Burma, and now he's back in Washington D.C. and so he's in the Foreign Service. Yeah. Next, up there, somebody call out. Yeah.
Hi, I have a couple of questions if you don't mind.
Well, let's start with the first question. Okay.
The first question is, I heard that you pitched an idea to Paramount for having a few episodes in the form of Where's Waldo?
Oh my God. That's true. What's that? I didn't catch the last part of the question.
Had it been approved in film, do you think it would have been on TNG or Voyager?
Oh no, I thought it would have been just my own show. Okay, next question. Yes.
I recently caught a rerun episode of Murder, She Wrote. What was it like working with Angela Lansbury?
Oh, Murder, She Wrote. I was 14 years old. I don't have any recollection. There are so many shows that I really don't have a recollection. I'm now at the stage, and I have to say I was that way 20 years ago, where somebody would say, I saw you in blah, 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 and you were, you know, good or something, and I go, oh, thank you. What about Days of Our Lives? Days of Our Lives, I remember very well. I had a wonderful time on Days of Our Lives. For those of you who don't know, I was hired. I had worked at Universal for 2 years under contract, which was really an unusual thing. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was the last of the contract players. And in that 2-year period, I did 42 shows, which is unheard of. In any case, one of the producers, or maybe it was, I don't know, one of the agents moved over to be a producer at Days of Our Lives. And she called me up and she said, they need a psychopath for 5 years. And I thought of you. So I said, great. And for actors, just getting the job and not having to audition, Brent Spiner and I were talking just today, how you know, you get to a point where you just kind of go, really, do I have to audition for this? I've done so much work in this area, and we bemoan this because in England, they give you. They think, oh, well, what about Brent to play that? And what about Lancie to play that? But in any case, you feel, once you are offered something, you didn't have to read for it, you feel a certain responsibility to even do it better. And so I took a look at the show, and I had never really watched a soap opera. I went to drama school, and soap operas, and I went to Juilliard, and soap operas and porno were sort of the same. Just, nobody talked, no. And so I took a look at the show, and I went, oh, okay, they want a psychopath, but they need a comedian. Because this show is really, really slow. So I figured, look, I'm just going to be there for 5 days, and I can be the killer, but I can have a sense of humor when I do it. And when I left after the 5 days, I walked out to the parking lot, and I said, I walked out of the parking lot, and the producers came out after me, and they said, you have to come back. And I said, well, I don't know how you're going to work that out, because I'm a psychopathic, child molesting, kidnapping, murdering. She got, don't worry, it's a soap opera. All right, next.
Mr. Lancie,
Yes.
this young lady.
Yes.
You have to be loud.
Will they ever make more of My Little Pony shows with Discord in it?
Will they make any more of My Pony shows with Discord in it? Now, I'm going to tell you a secret. I just finished 2 of them. But I don't want you to tell anyone. All right, next. Yes.
You play a variety of characters. Some are a little bit evil. Do you prefer playing the evil characters?
Well, sure.
They're great.
You know, they're just more subversive. They're just more fun. They're just more fun. You know, usually in television and what have you, one of the things is that I don't approach them as if they were evil. Even the most evil of people, you know, the arch-evil person, let's say, did not wake up every morning and look in the mirror and say, "Oh, how evil can I be today?" He thought he was doing a good job. So that's how I approach it. I approach playing those characters as if they were the lead. So that what happens, and actually, even though I was the lead in this play, I was the lead with saying things that were just like, whoa. I want the audience to walk away saying, look, I understand where he's coming from. I don't agree, and I don't like the way he does it, but I understand it. And that's the trick as far as I'm concerned. Okay, next. Yes?
You said you're doing a lot of stage acting now. Do you prefer stage acting or TV?
Do I prefer stage acting or TV? It just depends. If it's a good, everything depends on the material. TV is short and you get paid a living wage. Plays are long and you do not get paid a living wage. But you do those things because they are good for your soul and what have you. I happen to be somebody who, after about 6 weeks, have said, that's enough. 8 shows a week, that's enough. I have friends who've been in shows for 6 or 7 years. I consider that to be road work. Okay? I don't know how they do it. But in any case, for me, 6 weeks is about enough. Yes. Okay. And I can't see you, so just shout out.
You don't have to name names, but what would be the best or worst advice anybody ever gave you as an actor?
Well, I've heard a lot of advice over the years. One that I remember really well, Vanessa Redgrave made a comment that really made an impression on me. Because I went to sort of a hotsy-totsy school, the only thing that we really talked about was doing only plays, or only maybe, the best movies with whoever, Bergman or something like that. And she said, American actors make the mistake of identifying their careers by what they won't do. And in England, we don't do that. We just do everything. And I thought, you know what, that's really good advice. Because the actors who were my contemporaries, many of them who are no longer in the business, sort of identified their careers by what they wouldn't do. And what I discovered is that they didn't do very much. Next.
How did you feel about the character Q?
How did I feel about the character Q? Well, this is sort of a longish story. I can use this for a longish story. I was doing Terra Nova down at the Marte Performance. Terra Nova is a play about Amundsen and Scott, who and their trek to get to the South Pole first. If you can imagine, the entire set was white, and everybody, the Scott team, of which there were like 8 actors, were all dressed in that kind of gray canvas look. And then there was me in black, with a big handlebar mustache, spiked hair, and a leather coat with fur up to here. I mean, I looked really intense. And I was the specter, the ghost of Amundsen, pushing Scott on and saying things like, and I grew to really love Amundsen. He was a no-nonsense guy. Scott was carrying rocks. Scott was trying out. Scott epitomized the 18th or late 19th century idea of British exploration, with a huge company of people and what have you. And Amundsen represented the new way. Amundsen got within striking distance of the pole, got there himself, and ate the dogs to get coming back. And I was like, yeah, that's the way to do it. In the midst of this, I got a call from my agents. You have an audition tomorrow. It's for Star Trek. I said, I thought they already did Star Trek. Yeah, well, they're doing it again. And I don't know, this must be a typo, it's just the letter Q. And I said, you know, when is it for? It's around 4:15 or something. I said, I can't go, I'm in the middle of rehearsal. It was a co-lead. There was Scott and Amundsen. You just can't walk out of rehearsal. So I didn't go. And about a week later, my agent said, you didn't go? And I said, no, I'm in rehearsal. She said, well, there's a producer who keeps asking for you. I said, look, if you can make the audition at my lunchtime, I have an hour at 1 o'clock. I will go to this audition, which was up in Paramount. So understand something. I was already in Amundsen mode. Okay? So I came in, knocked off the audition, and I'm walking away, and this big guy, bigger than I am, comes out and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, you make my words sound better than they are. And I said, well, you must be the writer. He said, I'm Gene Roddenberry.
Oh.
He said, we're going to be seeing more of you. And I gave him that, hey, this is not my first barbecue. I'm like, okay. I said, and now I'm making my way to the door. And there's another guy, little guy. And he said, this is a payback. I go, what? He said, you're here because of me, and this is a payback. And I said, I'm thinking, I gotta get back to rehearsal. I said, what do you mean? And he said, about 6 years ago, I was on my back with a quadruple bypass operation. And every day, and the minute he said that, I knew where he was going. Every day at around 1 o'clock, I would watch you on Days of Our Lives. And you made me laugh when I thought I was going to die. And I figured if I made it, I was going to pay you back. He said, they're going to hire me. I said, great. But now, for the first time, I'm saying, when is this show? And he gave me the thing, and I said, you know what? That's not going to work out. Because we're taking Terra Nova, we're doing it here, and then I continue on to Japan, to do it in Japan for 3 weeks. He said, this is going to be much more important to you than the play that you're doing. Get out of the play. So I said, okay, And this is in 6 weeks. Yeah. Now, if I get out of the play, what happens if in the next 6 weeks a job comes in that's better than your job? Am I supposed to say the same to you? And he goes, okay. And that's when the agents got involved. And then they said they were going to change the shooting dates for me. They would change, instead of shooting for a month, which understand, I would have been paid for the month. They said, we will shoot everything, shoot you on the second 2-week section of that month. But you have to be back on Monday at 6 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And I went, oh my God. And I looked and I went, oh my God, my last show is in Tokyo on Sunday afternoon. I'm like, okay, it's just not going to work. And my wife went, international dateline. That's how I got on Star Trek. I left at 6 o'clock on Sunday, got back into the United States at, I don't know, midnight on Saturday, and was on the set at 6 in the morning on Monday, whatever the 18th or whatever. So that's it, yeah. All right, next question.
What was it like on the librarian set?
Oh, it was fun. Jonathan is a wonderful director. He's a terrific person, and he's a really wonderful actor as well. So it was just fun. And you know, shooting a television show is not. It's sort of a boring experience. It takes a very long time compared to what you think. So you know, it was nice. They're not nearly as much fun as you think. But all right, next, yeah.
My son wants to know, besides yourself, who's your favorite actor to work with on Next Generation?
Who's my favorite actor to work with on Next Generation? Well, you know what? A lot of that has to do with the scene and how it's written. So my favorite actor, which doesn't mean my favorite person, although I really like Patrick. The Picard and Q scenes were probably the best. Now I'm going to anticipate, you're going to say, well, what about with Voyager? Well, yes, Kate and I are very close friends, but they were not quite as good scenes because it wasn't too, that they wanted to make sure that the audience did not think that Q, or that Janeway had fell under some sort of romantic spell with Q. And I kept on going, why? It takes a lot of color off of our palette to play with. We could do all sorts of things going in, and the audience would be going like, oh, like that. But you're taking all of that away from us. Well, they were adamant about that. So it's really about the scenes. Next. Up there.
My question was about StarCraft. You voiced my favorite character in StarCraft, Ivor Alarak, and I wanted to ask about your opinion.
I think that Alarak has an anger management problem. The last time I was in the booth, I said, you know what? You should do. There should be just a little thing for the audience. Believe me, I know that they would like it. And that is that I play this character called Alarak. All he can do is scream and say, you know, ridiculous things like, you know, I don't know, you know, I will kill you 15 million ways, you know, all that type of stuff. I said you should have him like on his time off doing watercolor. You know, something which is like, how does he relax? All right, next.
So, in the sections of the years, what would you say has been the most thought-provoking in deciding how to pick a particular character?
You know what? It sounds like a really good question, but I lost the first say it again.
So, in your long career of depicting many characters, what would you say has been most thought-provoking when deciding how to pick that character?
What is most thought-provoking on how to depict that character? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
Well, out of all the characters you've played, which one has been most thought-provoking and how you decide to play that character?
Well, I've had a number of them. I mean, the ones in which, I'm going to go to plays that you haven't seen because you ask about the differences and what have you. With a play, you live with it for 4 or 5 months in the preparation of it and what have you. And I've learned things about myself. I mentioned Amundsen. I learned stuff about myself there. I also played Jack Tanner in Man and Superman, which is a play that everybody should read. It was so fantastic. 3 hours and 40 minutes on stage, and they went by like a shot. Everything that I said, I believed, only was saying it better. And so that was great fun. I look for parts that touch me, and that I go, oh, there's a little part of me. I'm of the feeling that there's a little part of all of us. I played a character called Bebao in another play. Bebao was an actual character, an actual person who was who ran the ghetto of Łódź in Poland. And he was a functionary. He was a Nazi, but not in the ideological way to the extent that he was mostly a manager. And this play was about the dialogue between Bebao and Rumkowski, who was the director of the orphanage in Łódź, who had now been made the mayor of the ghetto of Łódź. And at first I thought, how is it that I can play somebody where the characters are talking? It was a very difficult play to do because people are crying in the audience and the dialogue was very spare. And into this relationship that they had, everything was working fine, but into this relationship came the final solution. So now Bebao was not able to produce as many blankets and uniforms as he had wanted to, and Rumkowski was losing his people. And so there would be this dialogue back and forth between the two of them. And I'm struggling with playing somebody who seems to be as evil as that. And I had an experience. I'm standing in line, and there's a guy in front of me who takes his money out to pay, and he drops a $5 bill. And my first instinct was to go, oh, sir, here, and I give him the bill. But then I realized, you know what? I could have simply just moved forward and put my foot over that $5 bill. That was that little move that begins you down the road. And once I got that, I went, I can do that. Because there's a part of me that can do that. I understand that. And that's the fun part of acting. And that is you get to act these people. Because it's a part of you. It's a little part. It's not who I am. But there's a little part of me that I understand that. So that's sort of the things in which I get from playing characters. Yes. Somebody over in here. No? No other? No. Okay. Is there ever a role that I regret taking? Usually when I don't do a very good job. Yes, and sometimes they're just perfunctory. And, like the rest of you, I had to put my kids through college and pay the mortgage. So there are a lot of roles where you kind of go, there isn't anything really there. So you do as good a job as you can, but it's just not quite there. And there were a couple, I left a movie once where I said, listen, the level of violence is so high that I cannot be in this. And they said, no, we're going to tone it down, because it doesn't need to be this way. I said, great. I got the script the night before, and it was even worse. And I called the director, and I said, and I was really serious, I said, I won't do this. And he said, don't worry about it, I agree with you, just find somebody else. But I am forever happy that I didn't do that, because film lasts forever. Yes? Yeah. Go ahead.
Experience from their characters. Would you ever use your experience as a sailor to do a part?
Would I ever use my experience as a sailor to do a part? Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of things that I learned on this last trip. Things got a little hairy. And I learned, I could feel panic beginning to set in. You know, I could feel it going like this and beginning to move. And I went, I cannot let this happen. I cannot let it get into my head. I could feel it in my breathing. And I used acting technique to just relax. Just relax. There was a time where things were trending down. Little things, little tiny things, but they were meaningful. The drill, which should have been charged, was not taking a charge. And so Ray and I put a bit on a vice grip, and for about 3.5 hours, we turned that to go through about, I don't know, 1.5 inches of steel. We just turned that. Our hands were raw and what have you. And what I learned was, normally in life, I would go, okay, done, like that. We went, hey, we did it. We celebrated these little victories because everything began feeling like it was going like that. So those were things that I have toggled with back and forth. I'm very dyslexic, so for me to go out on stage on those first nights is really tough. Learning lines is not easy. It's all over. And I just have to calm myself down. So these type of things are helpful for both instances, in real life and in make-believe.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah. Oh yeah, okay, somebody over here.
Yes, okay. With the background you just shared about dyslexia and it takes you a bit, how was it working with Leonard Nimoy with your co-authoring of a couple books, I guess?
How was it working with Leonard when we had Alien Voices? But I mean, how do you mean that in terms of dyslexia?
Your experience with Leonard Nimoy,
right?
You know, in writing. I mean, I don't know Leonard Nimoy's background specifically, but you know, how was it working with him?
Oh, Leonard was great.
Not with exclusively, the background you just shared.
Leonard was great. I had been asked to direct the Orson Welles, I forget what it's called. War of the Worlds.
H.G. Wells.
And Leonard played the lead. So I directed him. And I had this idea in the back of my head already about Alien Voices. So I went to him and I said, listen, did you have a good time? He said, I had a great time. And he did. And I said, I have this idea, which is to create a company and, would you like to do that and what have you. So we worked very, very closely for about 4 years. Leonard was instinctively really good. And he taught me a great deal. He taught me a lot about where the heat was in the room and leverage and those type of things. He was also terrific. I would work on these scripts with a gentleman called Matt Sigaloff. And then I would give it to Leonard, and Leonard was redlining and stuff, but he was really terrific at going through. When you write a lot, you tend to lose a perspective. One of the things in which being an actor, I think it's really helpful that you throw the script to the actors. The actors are processing at sort of a micro level. So they're going to pick up things that you just have missed because you're up here and they're down in here. So we worked well back and forth with each other. Okay, yes, sorry. Somebody, yes.
What's been your favorite role to do for whatever reason?
What's been my favorite role? Oh, I don't know. I've been fortunate enough to have a number of favorite roles, so I don't have. Yeah, I love Days. Days was great. I never learned my lines. I just improvised the entire time. For me, it was like going back to high school, where the mark of success was today funnier than yesterday. Was today more fun than yesterday? If it was, you go, well, it's a good day. So it was that, and like this last show that I did, it was tough. It was a big step for me to be doing what I had to do. It was a lot of talking. A lot of talking. I have a final speech, the debate speech at the end of the play. It's about 14 minutes straight to the audience, and it's heavy-duty stuff. So those were things I went, I did it, oh, I did it. So those were personal successes. Yes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
As a dyslexic, what is something that you would like you wished your teachers would have known about you?
Well, when I flunked out of school, I went to a private school in Philadelphia, sort of a hotsy-totsy private school in Philadelphia. And I went in at, I don't know, whatever, is it kindergarten? Is that the first grade, something like that? And we were put into, first form, second form, and third form. Everybody knew that if you were in first form, you were a smarty pants, and if you were in third form, you were a dummy. Everybody knew. My class started out in first form, or put it this way, I was in first form. By the time we got to fifth grade, about 2/3 of the kids were in third form. We were going to be taught a new way to read. Well, it didn't work. Okay? We were not taught phonetically. And then on top of that, if you happen to be dyslexic, you are really awash. My parents, this was during the period of time when, just like with the doctor, if the teacher said, as in my case, well, Johnny is a little slow, maybe even mildly retarded. They believed it. And so I was actually put back a grade, which is really tough on a kid. I then flunked out of that school and went to a school for wayward kids, where everybody was like me. I mean, probably better. I mean, some of them were really good students, but certainly I wasn't. And the teacher, or the headmistress of the school said, I think your son might have specific dyslexia. I just thought, well, I don't know what that is, but it's a lot better than being called stupid. But nothing was ever done. There was nothing, nobody did anything. I had a wonderful teacher who would probably be in jail now. He would hit us. He would throw things at us. He was the history teacher, the sports teacher, my class was 19. My graduating class was 19. And he would say things like, all right, we're going to do, for Christmas, we're going to do Handel's Messiah. All of it. And we go, okay. So 19 of us are on a stage, a little smaller than this, doing Handel's Messiah, you can imagine. We're going to do Mozart's Marriage of Figaro. Fun. And in the springtime, he said, we're going to do Henry V. And I'm in the back, carrying on. And I got a hardback book thrown at me and hit me there. I said, bomb. He goes, Delancey, did you hear me? Yes, Mr. Wood. Yes, sir. You're going So go home and learn it. Well, I had a hard time reading it. And I was 14. And I went home and I started to learn it. And we did it underneath the trees. And a guy who came to see his granddaughter, his name was Matthew Black. And Matthew Black was the editor of the Pelican Shakespeares. I mean, you talk about great coincidence. And I finished, and he sought out my father, and he said, if your son has an interest, you should encourage him because he has a flair for this. And that summer, my father said to me, have you thought of being an actor? And I thought, you know, I've heard a lot of stupid things. But that's probably the most stupid I've ever heard. I go, no, okay. But, you know, it was the first time that I was ever good at anything in school. And so I grabbed onto it as if it were a life preserver. And my first job, professional job, I was 16 years old. Well, put it this way, my first professional audition, which was with Andre Gregory in Philadelphia. It was a big deal. And I came out to be in Bourgeois Gentilhomme. I would have played, you know, the flunky, you know, I mean, the spear carrier. But you had to prepare something. So I went out and I did it. And they said, okay, Lancie, you stay behind. You said, all right, that was very good. Read this. And I remember, I can see it to this day, I'm looking at the pages, my hands are shaking, and immediately the sweat is dripping off of my nose onto that page, obscuring the words. And I was really embarrassed. And the next day they called up in my house and they said, we'd like to offer you the role. And I didn't take it because I was so embarrassed. And that has been sort of an issue for me. There were, for years, I would look at something and I'd go, oh, too many lines. Too many words, too many words. I wrote a story about how I taught myself, but when I was 14, I began going, you know, I really need to learn how to read. And I used to, here's a psychological, I've never told this story. I worked with Rudy, the janitor. And Rudy and I had a great relationship. And so I worked with Rudy to clean the school every day, and at the end of and on Saturdays. Well, I cleaned the school, okay. I also cleaned out the library. I used to steal books. And I would go home, you know, like this. I'm 12, you know, or so, 13. I would go to the train, and people, you know, businessmen would help me on to the train as I'm taking these books. You know, they think they're in the presence of Voltaire or something. and I'm, you know, I'm sitting there, and I would take these books home. My parents didn't know what was going on. And I had all of these books around me, and I piled them up and what have you. This is pretty weird psychological stuff. And one day, a book opened up, and I would look at these books, and I'd go, oh my God, it's too many words, too many words. There was a book called The Golden Treasury of Poetry. And it was a little poem here on that page, and then, you know, something right like this here, and then maybe, you know, 2 or 3 short ones, and I went, oh, I can kind of see these. And I began to read them to myself and read them out loud. And that's how I began to learn how to read. And then when my first girlfriend, who I'm still in contact with, I would go over to her house, and the deal was that we would go out, but she had to listen to me read out loud for half an hour. So I began to do that type of stuff to get myself going, but the teachers never were involved. I don't think anybody understood what it meant to be dyslexic. Yes, sorry, that was way too long. Okay, yes, yes.
Okay, you were talking about the stress of your boat and fluid weather and everything. Have you ever had a situation when you were acting with your director where you were working on a big project and felt that too? How did you deal with that?
Well, I have that all the time. The question is that the stress of acting, you know, on the boat and then, you know, blah, blah, blah. I have that all the time. I mean, when I took on this last big role, I, for about a week, had a very difficult time sleeping, and I must have said to my wife or said to the agent, no, I'm not taking it now. You know, no, I should, and you know, so I would struggle with those things. These were skill issues. I don't have a fear. It's a skill fear, or a skill, you know. There are some actors that I know who are like acting machines. They're fantastic. I mean, they look, you know, when my wife and I did Man and Superman, it was, as I said, 3 hours and 40 minutes. She's playing the whatever the female lead was. And I just don't remember the name. And she had learned it. By the time she's helping me, she had already learned it in like 3 or 4 days. It took me a couple of weeks. So, so I feel that stress, and I just deal with it. I have a show right now that I'm struggling with right now, whether I'm going to do it or not, because I go, oh my God, it's going to be so difficult. But, you know, there's a part, again, Brent and I were talking, we can't call ourselves actors. Once you just say, I'm not going to do this, you're no longer an actor. That's the end. And I'm just not really quite ready for that.
From your sailing experience,
yeah.
Since you had a problem on the boat,
yeah.
do you now carry hand tools?
Do I now carry what?
Hand tools.
Yeah. No, yeah. It was an upper. It was a chain plate for an upper.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah. So actually, I'm getting ready to do this. Well, as I said in the beginning, I'm supposed to take the boat out next week, and yeah. Now I hear you. I hear you. Oh yeah, I have this. All right, next. Come on, up there. Yes. Shout out. Uh-huh.
Do you have different creeds for acting, like being an audiobook where you're just one long speech, and how do you make that happen?
Well, you know, the first audiobook I ever did was a Star Trek book, and I remember walking away from that, I'll remember it forever, walking away and going, yes, I read that. Now, I have to understand, I was like 45 years old, or 40 years old, or whatever it was. I went, yes, I did that. So I took great satisfaction about doing it. I mean, there are friends of mine who actually are very good at reading, and I wouldn't do it because it's too excruciating for me. But and I read, you have to understand, I read a great deal, but I don't know, you know. I've talked to people about how is it that, they said, well, you're just reading word and then this word and then this word. I'm already, this word is coming out of my mouth, but this word is coming out of my mouth, but my eye is already on this word. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting technique. And so, but it's not something that I'm going to do very much of. Yeah. That's it?
Mr. Lancie.
Okay.
Right, one more, please. One more, please.
Okay, all right.
Right here, please.
Oh, we'll do a couple more.
Right here. Mr. Delancey, right here.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can stop. Is Ford ever get a cutie mark?
What's that?
We go right here.
Get a cutie mark for the cutie map?
Am I going to get a cutie mark? That would put me in a completely different category. Well, I actually have a cutie mark.
What?
I do. And believe it or not, I got it on the beach in Hiva-Oa, which is in the Marquesas. And it is the same beach that Melville and Robert Louis Stevenson were on.
There you go.
When I came home I was gone for quite a while, when I came home and my wife, it was a night, my wife said, well, in case she went, oh my God, is that a tattoo? And I go, yes. She goes, I'm going to bed with a gang member. Just a couple more here. Yes. Yeah, go ahead. Just shout out the question. Oh, I think it'll be really great.
I think it'll be awesome.
I think it'll be really great. It's you know, I feel that the Star Trek movies, there's a clunkiness about them still. I think that one of the things that I don't think that Star Trek should try to do, and that is to be better at action. Because there's so many movies that are really fantastic at action. I think that they need to be more philosophic, more about, you know, some of these notions that, you know, that Gene has talked about, you know, it will be better and stuff like that. I understand that Quentin Tarantino does a lot of violent films, but he also has such an unusual way of looking at things that if he gets behind Star Trek, and I understand he was a Star Trek fan, which is different than others who have done this franchise, he will perhaps bring out that Star Trek-ness that is so important. Okay, nice. Next. One more. Yeah.
Stirred it. Stirred it.
Well, of course I have to say yes. I'm a huge Dragons and Dungeons. And I love Pinky Foot better than anybody. Yeah, no, sure. I actually like My Little Pony a lot. I think they're doing some really interesting work there. Really interesting work. I mean, there was one show that I remember specifically about where my character now has a friend, and you know, and the friend says, "Oh, I'd like, you know, we're going to go off and do something." I go, "Oh, of course, that's great." And I'm going to bring another friend for you to meet, and I get very jealous. And I thought, this is really, this is important. I have 80-year-old friends who get really jealous. And I just like the fact that this is a discussion for an 8-year-old that is going, you know, you've got to, so. All right, one more.
John, just keep in mind that before you know what's next, and you wouldn't like him when he's angry.
Is he here? Oh, he's not here yet. Okay.
You're safe.
Yeah.
Philosophically.
Philosophically.
Was Q a force for good, evil, or was he simply like Shakespeare's Puck, mischievous for the sake of mischief?
Okay, was Q a force for good, evil, or like Shakespeare's Puck, malicious? I never play it as if it were one or the other. So my feeling is that he was mostly at a philosophical agitator, you know. And it was really in the last episode, which I think to me is my most favorite, which is All Good Things, where I gave him a little sense that, hey, you know, I'm with you guys. As difficult as I may have been, I got you covered, you know.
You are quite a bird.
All right, thanks a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time for Mr. John Lancie. Thank you so much, everyone. We do need you to clear the auditorium unless you're a VIP.